White spice and when playing night.
There you go. Now we fix this here. A little bit.
Good afternoon, everyone. Let's go ahead and begin the full Committee of Education Administration. As we begin, let's have the clerk call the roll first.
Representative Baum. Carringer. Cassada. Sapicki. Clemens. Cochran. Darby. Gillespie. Hakeem. Haston. Lafferty. Love. Parkinson. Reagan. Vice Chair Hart. Chairman White.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. We're kind of leaning to the right here right now, it looks like. Yeah. Yeah. Representative Parks, you can be right in the center if you want to. You be the tiebreaker, okay? Okay, welcome everyone. Does anyone have any recognitions before we begin? Representative Cassada?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I think we've got 2 birthday boys in this room right now, don't we? And one of them, the chairman, and you, Mark White, I think you're 28.
28? Yeah.
And I think Kirk Hastings over here is 29. So happy birthday.
Chairman Haston.
I only had one birthday wish, and that was to get out of here before 5 o'clock. We'll see if that happens.
There you go. So we got a 5'7" and a 6'7" birthday guys here. All righty. I tell you, members, but anyone else? Representative Parkinson?
Thank you, Chair. Since you called my name, I wasn't going to say anything, but I just wanted to applaud you on your youthful look and let you know that you don't look a day over 72, and we appreciate having you.
So thank you very much. I appreciate you. Yeah, 1950. It's hard to believe it's going by that quick. Also want to recognize we have the new president for Austin P, Mr. Mike LeCarry. I met with him earlier today. Now, is he a representative for his area here? Didn't want to step over. Oh, they're right here, Representative Hodges. So got to meet with your new president today in a great college up there. So fantastic. And there we go. There we go. Anyone else? Representative Carringer?
Thank you, Chairman.
Mike. Your mic.
Thank you, Chairman White. I don't want to take a lot of time, but I would like to ask everyone, our Knox County Clerk, Sherry Witt, her Chief Deputy, Michael Pashur, young man, just a fabulous person, passed away early this morning, was diagnosed middle of December with cancer, and he is going to be a big loss for Knox County. And I just ask that you would remember our Knox County Clerk's office in Knoxville and Michael's family. He has a son. He was a single dad, and he was just a phenomenal person. So please remember that.
What was the last name again, Mike?
Pashur, Michael Pashur. It's P-A-S-E-U-R.
Okay. Yeah, members, before we start, I like to always open our meeting up with a prayer. We're the Education Committee tasked with the responsibility of passing good legislation for the youth of our state. And we got a lot of challenges right now, and we need to always lift that up. So if you all bow with me for a second. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for the opportunity to be a part of a constitutional government where we as representatives can come together and we can work together and make good laws, especially for the youth, the children of our state, our schools, higher education, K through 12, our teachers, superintendents, all of our LEAs. Give us the wisdom to do the right thing and work with them and bless them and protect them each day that they are in school. We also ask you to be with the family of Michael Pashur, as Representative Carringer has asked us, and be with the family and during this time of their loss. Through Christ's name we pray. Amen. Okay, if there's no other business, let's go ahead and begin our calendar. Before that, we have a presentation. Chrissy, I'm sorry. We got Chrissy D'Alejandro. Make sure I pronounce that right. Come on up, if you will. She's with Tennessee of Cheese. I've known Chrissy for many, many years. They do a great work with Tennessee Achieves, which is where Tennessee Promise grew out of. Is that correct? So I invited her to come and let this committee, so there's many new people on the committee, as well as old, to kind of give us an update on what Tennessee Cheese is doing. They're working all over the state for our students. So without any further ado, Chrissy, you're welcome. Just make sure your light's on, the red light's on. And since we're audio streaming, just state your name and your position for the audience listening. Try it one more time.
No?
There we go.
There we go. Fantastic. Chrissy D'Alejandro, Executive Director of Tennessee Achieves. Thrilled to be with you this afternoon. Thanks to Chairman White. I just wanted to open to say that thanks to many of you in this room, Tennessee Promise is a household name. You can't get in a cab or in an Uber or go to the grocery store without someone talking about Tennessee Promise. And in my mind, that represents a culture shift in Tennessee where we really think about post-secondary credentials in a new and different way. But perhaps you have not heard of Tennessee Achieves. And as the chairman said, we were the model for the Tennessee Promise, launched in Knox County in 2008 as a privately funded last dollar scholarship and mentoring program. But I thought I would walk you through some of our statistics. You may not know, but we probably represent your county. We represent 90 counties across the state of Tennessee. In fact, 89.4% of high school seniors are served by our program every year. They come to our program as high school seniors. We provide them with assistance to complete that free application for federal student aid or the FAFSA. We ensure that they have a volunteer mentor, someone locally. Many of you in here, I know the chairman has mentored, many of you have mentored in the past. And so thinking about the work of Tennessee Achieves is really the work of high school seniors all the way into the workforce. I would say because we are a very frugal organization. I grew up as a first generation low income kid from McMinnville, Warren County. And so I think my board keeps me around for the last 14 years because I don't really know how to spend money, but we do operate at $26 per student. You can see here again, 90 counties, 74 of those counties rural, 35 distressed counties. We're working in the urban cores. We're also reaching out to counties like Lake County, where we've existed for the last decade. As I said, the work began for us in 2008, but prior to the launch of Tennessee Promise, we did exist in 27 of Tennessee's 95 counties. I think the most important piece are how are we doing with students? I'm going to talk a bit about how we're getting these numbers, but I think it's incredibly important to think about the progress and growth that we're seeing in the post-secondary space over the last 13 years. You can see here just a benchmark, a student who attends a community college, first-time, full-time freshman, are retaining at about 53%. Students in our program that attend a community college are retaining first-year retention, so that fall-to-fall retention rate at 67%. Students coming through our program going anywhere are retaining at 74%. You can also see that all-important graduation rate. I could talk about the fact that our college going rate in the state rose 5% the year Tennessee Promise was introduced. In counties like McMinn, it was 7%. In counties like Murray, it was 11%. But across the state, we saw a 5% jump. But I think the most important measure is how we're doing with college completion. And you can see students who are completing our program have a 51% graduation rate. I am not pleased with 51%, but I can tell you that we've made significant progress since I assumed this role in 2008. Again, FAFSA, we're in the thick of FAFSA completion across the state. Many of our K-12 school counselors and administrators are continuing to push. The last year we hit a 90% FAFSA completion rate. Most states don't hit 50%. So thinking about the fact that our state leads the country every year is incredibly impressive. Every student has the opportunity to earn a credential. I will also tell you that one of the pillars of our program and now a requirement for Tennessee Promise is 8 hours of community service. Again, this idea of cultivating a culture of giving back with our students. This is not free college. The students do have some skin in the game. To date, our students have given back nearly 3 million hours of community service, and that work continues today. You may know us for our volunteer mentoring program. When we talk about Tennessee Achieves, I often hear Patrick, who works with the committee, just said, I mentored for 2 years in Nashville. And so over the years, we've recruited nearly 72,000 volunteers to work alongside our students. These students provide encouragement. They provide needed resource they serve as a needed resource to students, answering questions like, what's a semester? What's a bursar, right? If you're the first in your family to go to college, no one knows what a bursar is, right? And so they are there to answer these very important questions. I often hear, and I was just on a call today about the linkage between K-12 and post-secondary and workforce. I think that the mentorship provides an excellent opportunity for our business community to really get to know what's going on with our students as they're making this transition. And you can see here, 32% of our mentors are coming from business and industry. We also run summer programs at Tennessee Achieves. A little known fact, we've been hosting summer bridge programs between the high school senior year and the college freshman first semester since 2012. The idea here is for students who require remediation, and when we started this journey, that was 80% of our students who required some form of remediation, that they would have instruction at the college over the course of the 3 weeks to test out of remediation and find themselves more prepared for college level work. You just held a session on learning loss. I am very fearful of what learning loss will look like for this group of high school seniors that will graduate in May. And so we continue to provide this important support to our students. You can see 86 counties have been represented in our summer bridge programs with nearly 5,000 students served. And then most importantly, a 34% increase in retention for the students who participate in the program. I always sort of give this number in terms of communication. It is a large operation. Nearly 60,000 students come through our program every year and are served by my team and the mentors that walk alongside us. So 3 million text messages coming from our shop, and that's targeted text messages meant to nudge successful student behaviors. We also coach students. Thanks to the state of Tennessee, we have some funds earmarked to serve 14% of Tennessee Promise students. Is 14% enough? I would say absolutely not. I think coaching and supports really matter. I do think it's the game changer and difference maker we are seeing, particularly for our most vulnerable student populations. If Promise was meant to merely send the student to college who was going anyway, you would not need a coaching program. But if you want the student who never thought that college was an option to find success, earn a degree, and find themselves in a meaningful career, coaching really matters. And we're finding that with a 23% increase in that first year retention rate. I don't have graduation rates because this program wasn't launched in time for us to actually see that through. But once we do have those completion rates, I'd be happy to update you on that success. We also are operating a pilot program called Knox Promise, thanks to the Haslam Family Foundation. We like to be innovative and disruptive at Tennessee Achieves. We started off as an idea on a whiteboard that now has been taken to every student across the state. And we're hoping that Knox Promise provides students across the state with similar support soon. So we've developed a model that really builds off the foundation of Tennessee Promise, but allows every student in Knox County to receive additional layers of support. So it's not only the most vulnerable student, much like the state sees with the coaching model, but every student in Knox County who pursues Tennessee Promise is assigned a dedicated coach. That coach is walking alongside the student from the high school senior year through a career. So we're making sure that every hurdle is knocked down. It's a proactive coaching. We're not waiting for the student to come to us. We're going to the student, meeting with the students on college campuses. Right now, we're doing all sorts of Zooming and FaceTiming with the students, but we're making sure these students are staying on track. You can see here, we're also offering what we refer to as completion grants. also known as emergency grant funding. This provides transportation for students who lack it, books for students who actually cannot afford books. I will tell you that we hear time and again that the supplies at the TCAT are $500 or the books at the college are $500+. And so this eliminates that burden for our students. It's an up to $1,500 grant for the students under the Knox Promise umbrella, but you can see here the average is about $310. I'm going to walk you through what this retention looks like for students who receive a completion grant. So if you remember, first-time, full-time retention at our community college for students who are not being served by Tennessee Achieves is 53%. For students under the Knox Promise umbrella who receive a coach and who are receiving completion grants, as verified by the Boyd Foundation at the University of Tennessee, are retaining at 78%. 78 versus a 53% retention rate. So game changing in my mind, and something that we really need to think about as we continue to serve students across our state. Before I open it up to any questions that you have, I would be remiss. I talk a lot about numbers. I'm sort of a data nerd, and I'm excited always to think about how Tennessee Achieves can be making a dent in the universe. I wake up every day and think about how we can better serve our students. And this is a great representation of our students. Students going to technical college, right? Tennessee Promise really changed that technical college game. Before, if you remember, it was the Tennessee Technology Centers, right? And now we've really brought them into the fold and said, this is a post-secondary credential and you can have a really life-sustaining career attending the technical college. So heightening awareness. And then our students across the board, I think, are so thankful. So I'm here on their behalf and are happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you so very much. We'll open up for questions now. I saw Representative Parkinson's hand up first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You got to be fast in this committee. No, I didn't have a question. I just want to tell you your presentation is awesome, great energy, and I love what we're doing and what's happening with Tennessee Achieve. So keep up the good work.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Chairman Sapicki?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for coming today. I'm sure you've been paying attention to this committee on completion grants and our efforts that we're trying to partner with you and other groups to drive even more students across the finish line. The numbers that you give us when you have the intervention and the completion grants hopefully will drive us to being number one in promise graduation rate. And I think it will get us there. Another thing that we're pretty concerned about is remedial coursework, on how that, can you give us some information on how that is detrimental with delaying the amount of time that it takes for a student to get their certificate or get through college, adding more time and more pressure? And any thoughts on how we can reduce that rate with, we're posting a 90-something% graduation rate in high school, but that's not translating into being able to do the college coursework. So your thoughts on that?
Thank you, Representative. Yes, I believe the summer programs that we have in place are working. What we see with Summer Bridge is an 89% success rate with students who are participating. It's students giving up 3 weeks of their summer in order to participate. I will tell you that for students who don't come through a program and who do require remediation, oftentimes they don't make it through their first semester. It's incredibly frustrating to be in college and not be in college level coursework. And so what we see is that retention rate is much lower than their peers, but the graduation rate actually just falls off a cliff. I've seen completion rates as low as 5%, and that's been a few years ago, so you may need to fact check me there. But I do know that their rate of completion is fairly abysmal. But if we can provide targeted, personalized interventions for those students out. We could talk about what needs to happen in the K-12 space, but in that summer, that really critical summer between high school senior year and that freshman first semester, a lot of work can be done to eliminate that need for remediation. We piloted a program, 4 years ago now, at Southwest Tennessee Community College, and we took the 3-week program and actually made it 10-week and provided transportation. We eliminated food insecurity by providing lunch every day. And what we found is that 72% of the participants were Pell eligible, meaning coming from a low income background. 100% were identified as a minority student, and we had 100% success rate. So every student who entered that program not only eliminated remediation because of the co-requisite model that you all brought to the table, they also had 9 credit hours under their belt, so ahead of their peers. So it's programs like that that really do work. And again, I go back to this, but we have a saying at Tennessee Achieves is that meet every student where they are at scale. And I believe that we can do that.
Thank you. Representative Carringer?
Thank you, Chrissy. I just wanted to say thank you and thank you for all that you all do. We're very proud to have you all, and it does my heart very well to hear you mention Knox County very many times today. So thank you so much, and have a safe trip back home.
Thank you so much. Great seeing you.
I'm gonna say Chrissy stood these 5-syllable words. I get tongue-tied real quick. Miss Alejandro. You mentioned this disruption a while ago, and with the disruption we've seen the past year, I know you mentioned a little bit in your comments. What are we seeing? Are we seeing anything new on the horizon with the disruption of so many students in virtual coming out of high school?
It's a great question. I will tell you, Chairman, that students do feel a bit more disengaged than we've seen in the past. We've launched a campaign at Tennessee Achieves called Find Your Why. And so we're utilizing the 2020 class, so using student voice. So students who were in the midst of a global pandemic, who went to college anyway, who persevered, and we're using their voice to try to inform how we work with the 2021 cohort. The really lovely part is that we work with 90,000 students every year. And so we can ask them what they need. And so that's how we're trying to avoid what feels like could be across the country an educational disaster this fall if we're not creative and innovative. And again, trying to meet those students where they are and ignite what I always say to students, ignite that fire in their belly, helping them find the motivation, and also promising that there will be something on the other end. I think that workforce development, economic development side is critical so that students feel that it's a tangible journey, that they'll come out on the other side better than where they are. But yeah, they do feel a little more distant. It's taking a bit more to reach them. We're calling their mamas. We're trying to hunt them down as best we can. And I think we'll get there, but it will not be without some very intentional work.
Representative Parkinson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for bringing that point up. And Chrissy, thank you again. Is there a way? How do we take advantage of the experience that these students have gotten in surviving? Number one, they're survivors in surviving the pandemic, and I think that we should recognize them as survivors. They are survivors. I guess we all are, so far anyway. But how do we take advantage of the experience of being virtual and marry that to, the physical presence of the students in school and build on their virtual experience also? Because I think I want to make sure that before we, go down the road of condemning virtual, not saying that you're doing that or anybody else, so to speak. Apparently somebody's doing it if I thought about it. Huh? But before we go down that road of condemning virtual or saying it's all bad, how do we take that? Because we know that whether it's 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, some point, we're going to be virtual, right? And so how do we build on that experience that these students have received? And if we're going to be virtual at some point, then at least I want to be number one in being virtual.
Absolutely. Well, I would say for some students, they would prefer it, right? I mean, I think it does really work for some students. But I would argue after being in this work for nearly 15 years, some students need additional layers of support that virtual simply at this time cannot provide. And so when I say it makes me nervous, what makes me nervous is about that student who is completely disengaged, right? The teachers can't find them. We can't identify them. We're not seeing them apply for Tennessee Promise. They're not engaged in the FAFSA filing process. Those are the students that I'm concerned about. And I will tell you, Representative, what I think needs to happen is we're on a reactive course at this point, right? We're just reacting to everything that's being thrown at us. And God bless all our teachers, right? But in my mind, if we came up with a proactive strategy and again, sort of meeting each student where they are and identifying where we've been broken down along the way, I do think that we could have a really successful virtual experience for some students.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that, Chrissy. My daughter, who she's a sophomore, and she's probably tired of me mentioning her every time we speak in education, but I'm really proud of her. I mean, so she goes to Middle College in Memphis. It's a very good high school. Is completely optional, and she is a 4.3 GPA student, and she wasn't a 4.3 before virtual, but she's a 4.3. She's close to 3.9 or something like that. But in this virtual setting, she is really knocking it out of the park. And it just fits her because she's kind of laid back, I would call us social introverts. But the virtual setting has been amazing for her. And I'm sure there are other students out there also. And so I would like us as a state to be intentional, with where we go from here, because here's something that I think needs to be thought about. It may be a situation, and may not. I don't know. I'm not the expert in education, but we're experts in everything, aren't we, guys? Right. But it may be a situation of conditioning. If all we know is physically being in the classroom, and our conditioning has made it so that this is what we respond to, then maybe we need to be intentional from a policy standpoint also in taking this virtual experience and building on it so that our condition doesn't only reflect being in the physical classroom, but we thrive in the virtual space also.
Absolutely. Well, you think about the non-traditional student, the adult, like the adult is probably thriving in the post-secondary space in a virtual setting, right? They can work, they can raise their children, right? A whole different conversation. And for your student, it sounds fantastic. I do know for some students, they will need more.
Well, thank you so very much. We're up at 4:00 and we do have a calendar. Anyone else have a last question for Chrissy, Tennessee Cheese? I wanted Chrissy de Alejandro.
That's perfect, Chairman.
Do well to come down. I want you to be familiar with the hard work that they're doing, the organization, and 90,000?
90,000 students every year.
90,000. Thank you so much. If we can do anything for you, keep us posted. Thank you so very much.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you. Members, we're going to jump into our calendar. I promised Chairman Haston we'd be out by 5. And so we're going to have all the discussion we need. But the bills on the calendar, they'll start with number 1, House Bill 770 by Representative Alexander. You're recognized. We got a motion and a second on the bill. No members. You're recognized, Representative Alexander.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, committee. I just assumed I was supposed to sit down there since that's where she was from. I just came in the middle. I apologize.
Yeah.
This bill that I bring to you is a cleanup bill and a really good bill out of the administration. It's for special education behavioral. It cleans up the revisions that were done in the SEBSA Act, which was the Special Education Behavioral Supports Act. This bill authorizes and clarifies definitions to specify school personnel authorized to use isolation or physical holding restraint and ensure consistent use of language throughout the statute. The department has received feedback from the LEAs that emphasize the need for clarification of statutory language around isolation and restraint. I will be happy to read those different revisions to you if you would like.
Does any member request that reading, or are we good? I think we're good.
Okay, good deal. Then I call for the questions.
Okay, any questions with the description? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, any discussion? Hearing none. Any objection to the question being called? All those in favor of moving 770 out to calendar and rules indicate by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you.
Thank you,
very-
Chairman.
Thank you very
committee.
much. Item number 2, House Bill 454 by Representative Hodges. You're recognized. Okay, got an amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got an amendment to go along with this as well.
Okay, the is it 4565?
Yes, sir.
Okay, rewrites the bill.
Yes, sir.
Okay, you've got a motion second. You may go ahead and describe the amendment.
Okay, and so what this is it was brought to me by some of my military families. And so when a soldier PCSs from Fort Hood, for instance, to Fort Campbell, and they come here, you know, they have to leave, they have to pull their kids out of school in Texas. They come here, they try to enroll their kids in school, and they're told they need immunization record from Tennessee. So what this bill does is just allow them to use their immunization record from Texas or any other state in this great nation. And with that, I would also like to call my own question.
You're not new enough. Okay.
It's worth a shot.
Chairman Sapicki.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for this legislation. I try to verse myself in all the acronyms of education, but you gave a new one with the military PCS. Can you just give, what is PCS?
Yeah, it's when they're moving. Yeah. It's
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
With that, Chairman Reagan.
I was going to give that acronym.
Thank you, Colonel.
Further discussion on the amendment. Question been called on the amendment. Objection on the amendment. Hearing none, all those in favor of adding amendment 4565 to House Bill 454 indicate by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. You're now properly amended. You're now back on the bill. The question's been called on the bill. Any objection? Hearing none. All those in favor of moving 454, understand it's going to Health Committee. Indicate by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Moves out to Health Committee. Item 3, House Bill 497 by Chairman Rudd. Chairman Rudd, whenever the podium is ready, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee. This bill was brought by the bus owners.
Check the mic.
It's on.
Okay.
This bill was bought by local bus owners as well as LEAs have contacted me, thanking me for carrying it. This is to extend the negotiating period for privately owned buses with school systems from 4 years to 6 years. This helps with financing and it makes the process a lot easier. It also, I want to stress in extending this negotiating period for renewing bus contracts, for renewing the financing of bus contracts and et cetera. It does not, the legislation retains the discretion currently in code for school boards and directors by stating contracts could be as long as, but not exceeding 6 years. And that is the content of the bill.
With that explanation, members, questions, comments? Questions been called on the bill. Objection? Hearing none, all those in favor of moving House Bill 497 out to calendar and rules indicate by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. It moves out. Thank you. Brings us to item number 4, House Bill 225. Is Chairman Vaughan in the room? We will move that one to the Hill as of now. Item number 5 by Representative Leatherwood. House Bill 890. Representative Leatherwood, you have a motion and a second. See no amendment, so you're recognized on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. This bill would only apply in school systems where their alternative school is at the same location as regular school. And what this would do is give the director of schools the authority to determine if a student should be placed in the alternative school or some other action taken. This would only deal with students that have been expelled or suspended for 10 or more days and only when there's acts of violence or threats of violence. And, the obvious problem is someone's in school, they've threatened a teacher or engaged in some act of violence against a teacher or student. The alternative school is on the same campus. So you're just telling them, hey, you've done this action. We're going to take you from this room across the hall to another room. Doesn't make sense when the alternative school is on that same campus. So this would allow the director of schools the option to move them off of the school grounds. And I've been asked a question, I'll go ahead and answer now. What happens to them? Well, they can engage in remote learning as we are doing now from home. And with that explanation, I'll take any questions.
We have that explanation from Representative Leatherwood. Questions? Representative Parkinson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not trying to speak on every bill, but you got some good stuff coming through today. And to my colleague from Shelby County, thank you for bringing the legislation. Now, it was me that passed the alternative school bill a couple of years ago, and I think this is a good addition to it, especially when we're dealing with something that could cause safety in the school to come into jeopardy. So I think it's some good legislation. I'm actually going to sign on to it too. So thank you. Great job. But because you're from Shelby County, it's a great job.
Chairman Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to the sponsor, does your bill in any way handle the truancy issue? As in, if your students are taking stuff from home there, kind of like we have now, there's some truancy issues that are popping up right now. Does your bill address that?
No, it does not.
I would recommend you consider that for a follow-on bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions, members? Question's been called. Objection? Hearing none. All those in favor of moving House Bill 890 out to calendar rules indicate by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Moves out.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee.
Brings us to item number 6, House Bill 235 by Chairman Littleton. You have a motion and second, Chairman. When the podium is ready, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to say happy birthday to the
thank you.
chairman and the sub-chair, Mr. Chair Hastings over here. So happy birthday to y'all. House Bill 235 increases from $10,000 to $25,000 the threshold for which a local board of education or governing body of a public charter school must take purchases or expenditures by competitive bids if an LEA chooses not to follow the local government body's purchasing procedures. It establishes that counties that have adopted the County Financial Management System of 1981, the County Purchasing Law of 1957, or are similarly centralized for purchasing are deemed to have a full-time purchasing agent and authorized to increase the competitive bid threshold to $25,000 under certain conditions. And my district brought this to me and asked me to carry this bill. So,
Thank you very much for that explanation. Just for the record, I want to get this on the record. I have been brought to my attention, and I'd like to, if you explain, we're going from 10 to 25, and some people expressed consideration that with the federal stimulus money coming in, and we have 25,000 to 10 for accountability. Could you just address that for the record?
well, I came with the 25 because that's what my district asked me to do. But then I went back and did some research. In 2005, it was 5,000, and they moved it to 10 in 2010. So it hasn't been changed since 2010. So they asked me to up it to 25,000, and we really think that it'll help some small businesses. And they still have to get each department still has to get 3 bids, but they do that they can do it by phone, but it has to be transparent, and everything that they purchase is public record.
Thank you. Any other comments on the bill? Representative Cochran?
I was just going to point out that this brings it to match many county governments already, not on the school side, but on the county government side. Many of them are already at 25,000.
Right.
So,
right. We're really hoping it'll help the small business in our small counties, in our rural counties like I represent. So I think it's a great bill.
Thank you. Other members, any questions? Hearing none, without objection to the, can we call the question? Question's been called without objection. All those in favor of moving House Bill 235 out to Finance, Ways and Means indicate by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Moves out.
Thank you very much.
Item number 7, House Bill 378 by Chairman Crawford. You've got a motion and a second. I do not see any amendments, so you're recognized on House Bill 378.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee. This is the discount bill. I think I've made contact with about everybody on the committee, so I won't go into great detail. What this does is it grandfathers in all the discounts we have in place for higher education at this time, and it makes it from this point forward, if a representative or senator brings a bill that provides a discount for higher education, it requires them to find the money within the budget themselves instead of passing it off on Finance, Ways and Means.
Thank you very much, Chairman Crawford. I'm in support of this. We've addressed this many years. There's a lot of good feel-good bills and a lot of things we want to do, but we've done this to the tune of costing our university about $20 million a year that they have to eat the cost of it to this point. So I know higher education is supportive of you. Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a good bill, Representative, and I want to sign on to it. I remember you came in and explained it to me, because we've been passing unfunded mandates basically to our institutions of higher education, and so this will help with that. And thank you for bringing it.
Thanks,
And
sir.
please get us a sign-on sheet if you don't mind having Democrats on your bill. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome.
Okay, further questions of our sponsor? Hearing none. Any objection to the question? Question's been called. All those in favor of moving House Bill 378 to calendar and rules indicate by saying aye. Opposed? Moves out.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee.
Item number 8, House Bill 533 by Chairman Weaver. We got a motion and a second. Chairman Weaver, we do have an amendment. Okay, you have a motion and amendment, a motion and second on your amendment. Is it 4094?
That is correct, Chairman.
Okay, you now recognize, explain your amendment.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members. This is a bill that many of you are familiar with. We passed it out of the House last year. As you know, we have a shortage of teachers. You're struggling with it in your district. I'm struggling it in my district. And in fact, the nation is struggling with filling in the gap of getting some qualified professional teachers in front of our children. I want to lay out how this bill, what this bill will do. At Section 1 will allow out-of-state educators that possess the equivalent of a Tennessee professional teacher's license in their current state to receive a Tennessee professional level teaching license without being required to take an assessment or receive certain evaluation scores. Additionally, Section 1 includes specific language that supports military spouses seeking reciprocal licensure in Tennessee. Section 1 only applies to licensure applications effective on or after July 1, 2021. Then Section 2 permits educators who did not receive an evaluation score or only received one evaluation score within the last 2 years to replace these missing evaluation scores with either 1, the most recent evaluation score that is available, or 2, a recommendation from the director of schools regarding the educator's evaluation score. And also Section 2 is effective upon becoming law. Section 3 gives the State Board of Education the authority to promulgate the rules for this legislation. And Section 3 is also effective upon becoming law. That's very important. We've got teachers in a bubble who are waiting to get in front of our children. And by passage of this bill, Tennessee will have more incentive, will be an incentive to bring teachers into our state. And so there you have it. Let's get her done. Let's get the teachers across the state line and get them in front of our kids.
Thank you, Chairman Weaver. We've had a question on the amendment. Any objection to that question? Hearing none. All those in favor of adding Amendment 4094 to House Bill 533 indicate by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. We're now back on your bill. Is It's properly amended. There's been a question on the bill. Any objection? Hearing none. All those in favor of moving House Bill 533 out to government operations indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Moves out.
Thank
Chairman.
you.
Thank you, Chairman
Chairman of
Weaver.
the committee.
Item 9, 537, House Bill, Representative Hawk. Motion and a second. You're recognized. I do not see any amendments on your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. Honored to bring before you House Bill 537 that's going to allow us to improve the ratio of funding for nurses in the BEP formula. We have been working on this, the chairman and myself and others have been working on this issue for several years now. We've had several folks on this committee who have worked on this issue, introduced bills with the ratio. We're going with the ratio that we feel is most comfortable and most appropriate for school districts, lowering that ratio currently in the BP formula, 1 nurse for every 3,000 students down to 1 nurse for every 750 students.
With that explanation, members, we have open for discussion. Hope that question's been called. Any objection to that question? Hearing none. All those in favor of moving House Bill 537 out to Finance, Ways, and Means indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it.
Thank you, Chairman and members.
If anyone's wondering why we're moving so swiftly, we give credit to Chairman Haston. These all went through subcommittee, and we vetted these very, very well, Chairman Haston, so we're on a roll. Item number 10, House Bill 212 by Representative Clemens. You're recognized. Got a motion and a second. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this is my Stop the Bleed legislation. It got held up last year because of the pandemic after it moved through the committees, but this authorizes LEAs to develop and implement a Stop the Bleed program in consultation with local law enforcement. This is brought to me by the College of Trauma Surgeons and Vanderbilt Medical Center and other trauma surgeons across the state of Tennessee. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chairman Bond.
Thank you, Chairman White. And Representative Clemens, I consider you to be a very knowledgeable attorney, and so I hope you'll bear with me while I ask you a few legal questions about your bill, just because I want to learn from you. The LEAs in the schools and the LEA employees in your bill would be given civil immunity if they, I guess, somehow mishandle the bleed control kit.
Mm-hmm.
But the civil immunity does not apply if these employees or schools or LEAs are grossly negligent.
Mm-hmm.
I guess my first question is, how would you define gross negligence, and how would that be different from simple negligence?
Well, negligence is a person acting reasonable under the circumstances of any other given situation or same or similar circumstances. It's a subjective analysis of a action by someone, and it's a component of proving a case for negligence. So the standard is generally, would you act that way under normal similar circumstances? Gross negligence is a heightened standard where if they purposefully tied a tourniquet on the wrong leg, then you're looking at someone who's being reckless or grossly negligent in a case. The code as it exists in these instances of life-saving maneuvers is throughout the code is consistent on creating this type of burden. So if someone is acting in good faith or as a good Samaritan, so to speak, throughout the code, they are protected acting as a citizen rather than, if they were grossly negligent or purposefully did something to harm someone. That's the difference.
Thank you for that information. And who would make the decision on whether the actions are grossly negligent versus not negligent or simply negligent?
A finder of fact.
The court, the jury.
Mm-hmm.
And then my last question is, what if the teacher is just simply negligent? Maybe they should have gone through training and they missed their training. Would we want the student to have some kind of recourse if they suffered some type of significant injury? It seems like the civil immunity would prevent them from having any recourse from simple negligence?
No, it doesn't keep them from having, if they thought that someone acted inappropriately purposefully, which I don't think any teacher is going to purposefully put a tourniquet on the wrong leg or respond inappropriately in a life-saving emergency to stop a traumatic bleeding incident. That individual could, if they so chose, bring a case, but I suspect it would be summarily dismissed in pretrial motions, whether it be Rule 12 or Rule 56, what have you, because they didn't meet that standard of proof of someone acting as a good Samaritan.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Chairman White. The committee may not realize Representative Clemens and Parkinson and I have been discussing these issues for several hours, and so we're just very interested in them. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Anyone else have a question of the sponsor? Question's been called for on the bill. We're on House Bill 212. Any objection to the question? Hearing none, all those in favor of moving House Bill 212 out to Finance, Ways and Means indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it.
Thank you.
Members, I know I rolled this to the hill, but would you allow me to come back to 4 for Chairman Vaughn? He is the chair. He is the chairman of a very powerful committee that we're all probably going to have to go before, so we're going to get him back up here. Plus, House Bill. Okay, we're on House Bill 225. Motion and second. You do have an amendment.
Number 30, drafting code 3709.
Drafting code 3709. You have a motion and have a second. Okay, you may explain your amendment.
The amendment allowed, Mr. Chairman, and appreciate the hard work this fine group of folks are doing here at this late hour. So true public servants, if I've ever seen a group. What the amendment does, it allows the school board and the LEA to designate their superintendent, which is their sole employee, to make the decisions to convey and make the decisions regarding school closures.
Chairman Vaughn, does this adding to the bill, this doesn't rewrite the bill, right?
No,
This-
sir.
Okay.
No, sir.
We've got a call to question on the amendment to add to the bill. Any objection to that? Hearing none. All those in favor of adding the amendment 3709 out to House Bill 225 indicate by saying aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. We're now back on your bill as amended. You may explain the amendment.
Thank you,
bill.
sir. We all learned a lot during COVID. We're still learning things that we did right and things that we did wrong. What this bill attempts to do is to add local LEA control back into whether or not they open or close their schools. I've used the example before that we rely on those same LEAs to determine during weather emergencies whether or not it's safe for their children to attend schools or not. And so along those same veins, we saw it to where I believe and others believe that their authority was usurped to some degree, and we're trying to clarify that issue.
That explanation, members, on House Bill 212. Excuse me, no. Hang on a second. We're back on 4. House Bill 225. Any questions? Chairman Sapicki.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Vaughn, we've had a long relationship here with your legislation that you bring before Education Committee, and sometimes some of your legislation is very suspect when you bring it here, but this one is one of your better pieces of legislation, so continue the good work, sir. Thank you.
Let me go to Chairman Reagan, then come back to Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to the sponsor, I noted that you have specifically excluded certain people in this decision-making. If there is a conflict in the law on the decision, as in currently we have some independent health boards in our state that by law, and some would argue this an improperly worded law, but nonetheless it's there, that would have the authority to supersede this. How do you resolve that conflict?
It's our intention that this bill will lay that authority, the sole authority for determining opening and closing of schools, to the LEAs.
puts it back in their hands.
Chairman Reagan.
So that is countermanding the health board in those counties where it's independent. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. But allow me to say this, is that even in those cases, the local health department would still have control. They could shut down the cafeteria because they regulate the cafeteria. So the LEA would have to come up with a corresponding plan to do that. So we're not taking the health departments out of the equation, but we are taking them out of the equation of whether or not school children are attending classes.
Thank you, Mr. Sponsor.
Representative Parkinson, do you have a question?
No, but not a, well, I guess it's a question. Mr. Chair, thank you. Mr. Chair, thank you. And to my colleague, Chairman Vaughn, first of all, you're a Shelby delegation member. None of your bills are suspect. Secondly, I think this is a good bill, but I don't know of, and you may be able to respond to this or not. I don't know of any superintendent or district leader that would make that decision in a vacuum without consulting with the health professionals of their communities.
And that's been my point all along, sir.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is a good bill considering everything that we've been working on. And plus, I love the fact local control. Great job. I probably shouldn't have said that, but thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion on House Bill 225. Any objections to the question? Hearing none, all those in favor of moving it out to calendar rules indicate by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Moves out.
Thank you all very much.
We're going to go now back to item 11. Representative Gillespie, you may present from your seat if you prefer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So,
we have a motion and second. I do not see amendments on this bill, so you're recognized.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry about that. What this bill addresses, THEC currently provides a number of reports throughout the course of the year, and there are a couple of reports that they do that the data they get is from the prior year, and so the report is not very accurate. It's basically a year out of date at the time of publication, and this is just addressing that issue. I am more than happy to go into more detail of the specific reports, but it's pretty self-explanatory, I think, and I welcome any questions.
Does any member desire more detail? I hear none. Objection to the question? Question's been called. So all those in favor of moving House Bill 763 out to calendar and rules indicate by saying aye. Opposed? Moves out. Item 12, House Bill 713 by Representative Hurt. You're recognized. You got a motion and a second on the bill, but you also have an amendment. It's Amendment 4287. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
You're recognized on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Amendment 4287 just clarifies that that all options in the state of Tennessee are exhausted before the student is allowed to the BEP funds to follow the student out of state.
The question been called on the amendment. Any objection? Hearing none, all those in favor of moving Amendment 4287 on to House Bill 713, indicate by saying aye. Opposed? You're now properly amended. You're back on your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 713, we've visited this for a couple of years now, but hopefully we'll get it on through. House Bill 713 addresses BEP funding following students that, because of a student's treatment plan from a qualified physician, are sent to an out-of-state facility. It allows the facility to receive BEP funding for educational services provided during behavioral treatment. These facilities' educational programs are qualified by the Department of Education. With the amendment added, it clarifies that only when all options in Tennessee are exhausted, then the BEP funds can follow the student. And with that, I'll take questions.
Questions on this bill? Representative Gillespie? The objection's been withdrawn, or the question's been withdrawn. Representative Gillespie.
I just thank you for bringing this, and I appreciate the amendment. I'm curious, when you say all available options in Tennessee, can you just kind of elaborate on that? Is that a pretty quick process? I'm just concerned about children that need to be at an out-of-state facility that this would add a length of time to that and cause duress.
Representative Hurt?
Sure, thank you for that question. And to clarify, I think it comes back to the treatment plan from a qualified physician will determine the direction that student needs to go. And if there is another facility in the state of Tennessee that can offer the treatment to that student, that is the first place they will be directed. If there is not another facility in the state of Tennessee that can provide that treatment plan, or there is another one whose beds are full, then the student will be allowed to go out of state. And I don't believe that will be a long process. We want what's best for the student here.
And this was one of the reasons I always like to bring this up. Representative Andy Holt, we gave him grief for 2 years and never got this bill out. And that was one of the objections, but Representative Hertz worked on that and got that amended. One of the reasons. But anyway, this bill's been before us for about a couple of years now. So any further discussion on House Bill 713? Question's been called. Do I have an objection? Hearing none. All those in favor of moving 713 out to Finance, Ways, and Means, indicate by saying aye. Opposed? Moves out. Item number 13, Representative Heston, that's yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill, I'll explain it as briefly as I can. Currently, LEAs can extend school days by 30 minutes. Most of them take advantage of this, and they do this to accumulate stockpile days, usually in the neighborhood of 8 to 13 stockpile days that they can then apply towards bad weather events, so snow days, flooding. These days cannot be used towards extreme sicknesses in case that there's a flu outbreak and extreme absences of teachers and students without first having to request permission to use those days from the Commissioner of Education. This will just remove that requirement where they can use their days as they deem fit. And that we're glad to take any questions.
Okay, Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, sponsor. I just wanted to make the point for anybody who questions whether or not we can work in a bipartisan manner up here. I want you to take a look at that road crew of co-sponsors on this bill as an example of how we can work across the aisle. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, that's quite a group right there. I'll tell you. Okay, any discussion on House Bill 587? Question being called. Objection to the question? Hearing none. All those in favor of moving 587 out to calendar and rules indicate by saying aye. Opposed? Moves out. Thank you. Last Bill 14 is House Bill 475. I'm going to turn the gavel over to Vice Chair Hurt. Summer study. General Sub.
Thank you. We have a properly motioned and seconded. Chairman White, you're recognized on House Bill 475.
Thank you. And we do have an amendment, 3742.
Motion and second on the amendment.
Rewrites.
Amendment number 3742, is that correct?
Correct.
We have a motion and a second on the amendment. Any objections to calling the question on the amendment? We're voting on the amendment. All those in favor of adding the amendment to House Bill 475, say aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Chairman White, you're recognized on House Bill 475 as amended.
Okay, thank you. And this amendment rewrote the bill. As I explained in subcommittee before everyone, we're kind of correcting. We passed a law earlier, it's Public Chapter 708 last year, and the new law prohibits school officials from notifying parents of suspected child abuse and child sexual abuse and requires districts to refer any questions from parents to the investigating law enforcement agency. As I mentioned earlier, the reason we did this, a lot of times when you have a suspected child abuse or sexual abuse of a child in the school, if everyone gets engaged and starts asking the child from the teacher to the principal and every time, the stories can get convoluted. So it's best to turn it over to the professionals. And so we passed that the school reported directly to the professionals. Well, last August, the U.S. Department of Education enacted new regulations under Title IX of the Civil Rights Act of '64, which prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex in an education program or activity. The new regulations require districts to notify parents during Title IX investigations. So this bill corrects that where it says House Bill 475 is amended, addresses this issue by allowing parental notification if all of the following conditions are met. When federal laws or regulations mandate disclosure, the child's parent is not the alleged perpetrator or complicit with the abuse or neglect, and the notification is done in conjunction with the Department of Children's Services. So it's just kind of setting us up in line with the federal law that came out while protecting children that are maybe exposed to child sexual or domestic abuse. And with that, Mr. Chair, I renew my motion.
Thank you, Chairman White. Any questions or comments on the bill? Question's been called. Any objection? With that, we'll vote on House Bill 475 as amended. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? House Bill 475 passes. Moves on to calendar and rules.
You can go ahead and motion us adjourned if you like.
Motion to adjourn. Y'all have a great evening.